Welcome back to another episode of CyberBytes, the podcast. I'm your host, Joseph Cooper, and today's guest, we have Max Corbridge, the CEO and co-founder of Secure Agentics. You're going to enjoy this show. We cover everything AI security and everything Secure Agentics. All right. Introducing Max Corbridge, CEO of Secure Agentics. How are you, mate?
I'm all right, thank you, mate. I'm all right. Thanks for having me back on.
Well, thank you for coming in. We spoke 6 months ago. We were talking more about the Anthropic report where they were talking about the first AI orchestrated cyber attack.
Yep.
6 months on, man.
Yeah, 6 months on, nothing's really changed. We've seen a lot more of that. China are kind of not relenting on that front. Loads more nation state powered attacks. And now that's not even breaking news. That's just, the standard state of affairs, really. But it was good to speak then, but good to be back again and excited for the talk.
Love it. Well, speaking of news, I feel like I'm seeing you everywhere. BBC News. I've seen you doing some fireside chats. You even had like an AI security beach party, I believe, this week.
That was a new one, a beach party in the middle of London. It's been a busy. I feel like I'm on a bit of like a content roadshow at the moment, which is not, it's balancing that with all the other stuff that we're doing. But it's nice to be invited back to speak, and it's nice to be able to speak at BBC as well. There's always stuff going on. I mean, the fact that AI security has made headline news like 5 times this year is pretty compelling to show where we're kind of at and the kind of pace of change. So I'm hoping that will continue on, and always looking to kind of be able to. I feel like I'm shouting from the rooftops a lot of the sort of like AI security side of things. So there's a lot of opportunities to speak.
Love it. So thanks for coming to the real beach party
down
in
the real
Southampton.
Beach party,
So definitely appreciate that. I think with all of my guests, Max, I like to just take it back to how they got into the industry and where it all began for them. But I think you've got quite an interesting transition because you did a languages university degree and then have got into security. So how did that happen?
Yeah, so I always thought I was going to join the army, then decided I wasn't going to join the army. Did languages because I was like, well, if I don't use my degree for anything, then at least I'll be able to speak a language. That was basically my thought process. And then did that, but as I got close to the end of it, I was like, you know what, maybe I'm not going to join the army, but I'd kind of committed in my mind to doing something that was quite like exciting, challenging, different, and going to like a desk job just didn't really fit what my plans were, but I didn't know what that was. So then sort of, in a bit of a spin and thinking what to do. And then I heard about ethical hacking as a job. I was like, wow, that sounds like a pretty cool space thing. You can get paid to go hack into banks and all that kind of stuff. But I didn't know how to, hack, or I didn't know anything really about computers at that stage. So had to go back to the basics and teach myself everything. Spent like 5 months really like locked in and just really just put my head down and focused on it, did a load of certifications, and then eventually got a job. And then worked my way up over the next sort of 7 years throughout the consultant side of things, and then leading teams, and then all of that, and then now into founding. But now I look back at that and I'm like, wow, there's a million things I could have done. That was not the one I set my sights on, but now it's led to this like whole career and sector, which is now booming. I always thought that it was going to be booming, but with cyber, especially around AI stuff, it's even more so. I think everyone on the street knows about the risks of cyber. Like, they know it's positive, but they also have that sort of like, oh, but it's a bit dangerous, isn't it? And so now I've found myself in a really lucky spot with where I am today, but it wasn't as well thought out as it seems.
Did you ever use the language skills through any of your red teaming exercises?
I had a lot of French and Spanish colleagues, and in fact, once I did actually impersonate someone who was French, but that was very, very briefly on the phone. But apart from that, not really. It hasn't served me terribly well. But that's mostly because most people who even are French or Spanish will be working in English-speaking companies, and so it's like, I actually used to try and force people to speak French and Spanish to me at work. But now I don't have any French or Spanish colleagues, so I can't do that right now.
Well, we won't be doing this podcast
in
French or
Spanish,
so we're good there. I think there may be some folks listening in that are sort of in a graduate scheme or looking to break into the industry. You mentioned you just sort of knuckled down and did a number of certifications. Like, what advice would you give to those guys or girls that are really wanting to break into the industry?
Yeah, I think it's probably slightly different to when I was doing it now, but I think the way that I would approach it is probably the same. And I actually had this conversation with somebody very recently who was looking to do it. I would say what worked for me was being like super active in terms of like, okay, these are the things I don't know today, and I need to address these. And when I address each one, I'm going to post about it on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's great. I've always been posting on there to show that kind of that's the way I'm going. As well as just sort of, the honest answer is like not taking no for an answer. So like I ended up getting my first job because I messaged some guy who could hire me one day on LinkedIn, who's now one of my really good friends. And I kind of said like, look, what would I need to get a job in your company, right? And then he was like, right, well, you don't have this, you don't have that, and you're missing this. So I went back a month later, came back with like 3 of those things. But like, right, now what do I need to get a job in your company? He was like, right, well, you need maybe a bit more of that and a bit of this. And I was like, right, came back a month later. Eventually he was like, this guy's not going to leave me alone. So he ended up offering me the job. But I think there's a lot of that, which I'm like, people who are kind of like assuming that it's going to be a really easy ride in because they did computer science and a cybersecurity master's. Like I didn't do either of those, but like the tenacity to like just show that you were going to stick it out and this is what you wanted to do. I also, and I don't know if this is particularly good advice, but it worked for me, is I was very specific about what I wanted to do. So like a lot of people will be like, I want to work in cyber, right? And cyber is like a massive field. And so you can do, you know, the defensive side, the attacking side, you can do the forensic side, you can do the incident response side, you can do so many different things. And I was very clear, like, I want to be a pen tester, I want to work in ethical hacking. And that's all I focused on. And I focused on it like religiously. And that really helped the people I was speaking to be like, okay, this guy knows what he wants. He wants to come and get a job here doing this role versus this guy doesn't actually know, you know, if this is the right thing for him or if it's another team in the company. And so it's quite easy to pass on someone like that versus kind of going really hard for what it is. But ultimately as well, you have to decide like what makes sense because you don't know that at the start what you're going to like. I kind of took a bet that I was going to really like ethical hacking, which I did.
Yeah.
But again, it kind of helped me get in, but it can be tricky.
Yeah. The red teaming sort of space for me is probably one of the more exciting and interesting, just personally for me.
That's not just you, that's everyone.
Yeah, probably over GRC. No offense, anybody. But in short, your career as a red teamer must have seen you have some pretty cool experiences.
Definitely.
Like, have you got any like just 1 or 2 war stories you can share around your red teaming experience?
A couple of the ones that like stand out were, so most of what you're doing is digital, like digitally, you know, hacking in, sending phishing emails, whatever. But occasionally you used to get the projects which were included physical as well. So you're physically able to break in. So like we actually had a really good success rate with one of those. But I remember one night, I can't remember where, I think it was around somewhere near Cheltenham. We were like breaking into warehouses at 3 a.m. and we got tailed by the police because they saw that we were on this private estate at like whatever. And I remember one of my colleagues was picking a lock and we saw some lights turn on in a building like 30 meters away at like 3 a.m. right? So something's going on. And also because the lock that he was picking was on this like, you know, like the big sliding doors, like the gates that kind of slide down that have a door in them. It wasn't like just a fixed door. And so every time he was like pushing against it, it was like rattling. And so we were like, it was making a lot of noise. And then the lights came on and we bugged out. So that was one. I think another one as well was like, convincing somebody that I was their boss and getting them to install a piece of software which I'd created, which hacked their machine. Wow. And allowed us like straight in. We basically said it was like a VPN was out of date and this is what we use to protect customer data. It's really important. You need to do this right now. Spoke to them on the phone, texted them as their boss because you can change the phone numbers that you receive texts from. Did all that, and then I remember letting the client know because at the start of that project, the sort of action that we agreed on, which was like you have to try and change this like super important record for the company, and they gave us a fake one to change rather than the main one because it would actually really mess them up if they did that. And they were like, honestly, we don't think this is possible. There's like an 8-stage approval process to get to that. And you don't have access to the system to even raise a ticket to approve those changes. And so I had to get super creative around who makes the decision in terms of pushing it forward. Why would they theoretically not be able to use that system? And they were at the hospital is what I said. And I phoned them up as somebody else saying, look, we got this massive issue. We need to do it right now. And then they ended up making the change. And I remember letting the client know and their like jaws dropped the next morning. They were just like, I cannot believe that worked. And I was like, I know, but you know, that's the good. That career is like so fun. It's so exciting, so challenging, very, very intense though. Like don't get into that world unless you're ready. Like when you've got a project, which is, you know, like 8, 9, 10 weeks long and you get halfway through and you've achieved like none of your major progress milestones, like you've not even got into the organization yet and you've still got to get in and then you've got to move around and privilege escalate and get to the actions on objectives and all that good stuff. It's like that is like everyone hands on deck. You're not sleeping, you're thinking about how you can what crazy ideas might work. So it's very intense, a lot of stress, but it's very good fun.
So it also isn't just solely technical then. There's like that social engineering bit with
Definitely.
then like the psychological aspect of it.
Yeah, it's like a really well-rounded test, which is why generally people don't get into red teaming in the offensive security world until they've done a couple of years of other things. So like I got into pen testing where you're allowed to do everything. It's all above board. Everybody knows, and you can throw everything at a product, a website, or whatever, and you can just use all your tooling, automate it all, and just like throw everything and see what works. But when you're in red team, you have to do everything like very, very fine tuned. And if you trigger detection systems, then you're going to get caught. So you not only have to know how to hack everything that you might come up against in an organization, from like the external to the internal to the cloud to everything. You have to know how to do all of that. You have to do it in a way which doesn't trigger any alarms, which means you only get like one attempt to do things and it needs to work first time. And you've got loads of security systems. And then you sometimes need to do things like the social engineering on top of that. So it's like, it's a proper like all-rounding test for hackers. It's great, but it's the most fun you can have, I'm sure.
Yeah, for sure. I know you're sort of regularly on the news now, but when you first sort of rose to fame, I was reading up on your Microsoft Teams vulnerability.
Correct.
How did that come about? And
that was pretty. That was a really cool find, if I say so myself. So we basically we were at that stage. We were like, how do you get into organizations? That's like your foothold. That's the first bit. And the way typically people were doing that was through phishing, like email-based phishing. And so there was a whole history of like, how to do that and what works and what doesn't work and stuff like that. But then the problem with email-based phishing is that there's so many security controls, like just around an email inbox, and I won't bore you with them. There's probably 15 different security controls that stop you from being able to do that. And so at that time, everyone was starting to use a lot more Teams, a lot more Zoom for all of their, email was slowly kind of becoming less of like the core business thing, and it was more on that. And so we started exploring routes where you could do the same outcome, which is send somebody a malicious file, but through Teams. And we found a vulnerability which allowed you to do that really easily from external. And it essentially bypassed all of the need to go through email entirely. And we let Microsoft know, and we used it on a red team to prove that it really worked, and we got our initial access through it. And we posted about it, and we told Microsoft about it. They said it doesn't meet the bar for fixing because it's not serious enough, which is like that is a classic Microsoft phrase. They say that to basically everything that isn't like a P0 hairs on fire kind of thing. And so then we were like, okay, well, fine, we're going to post about it. And then it went fucking viral. It was on Bleeping Computer like 4 times in the coming months. We saw some Russian like nation state actors using it. We saw like so many different, it went, huge. And so then we were like, right, now do you feel like fixing it now that, everyone's kind of talking about this a bit more? And I still don't know, actually. I need to double check if they have fixed it. The last I heard they hadn't still. So it's like still very much available to I might have to
warn them before this podcast goes viral then that they need to get that fixed. Brilliant. Well, let's dive in a little bit more around how did it go from red teaming to then thinking about starting your own startup, because it's not the easiest thing to do in the world.
No, it's not. And so I'd always wanted to do my own startup, and I'd worked at several places where the founders were still there. So I'd already seen and heard the founding journey from like 4 different sets of founders. And every time I was like, yeah, I think I could do that. But I didn't know what I wanted to do because they were all at consultancies, and I didn't want to work at a consultancy. Like, I've worked enough to know that it's really tricky. It's razor thin margins. It's, hand to mouth, trying to keep the business moving forward and keep your pipeline fed. And the idea of doing something in the kind of product world felt a lot more long-term sustainable and something which could grow a lot faster as well. So I was like, okay, that's what I want to do, but I don't know exactly which thing to do, well. And then that's when I was like, well, what have I done for the last, basically my whole career is like avoid getting caught by security controls and like specifically EDRs, like what CrowdStrike do. And so we like to the point where we had, spreadsheets for every single EDR and what you could do against each one of them, that they were blind to, what things were going to get you caught and how they worked under the hood and how you could bypass how they work. So it's like with all of that, like really low level understanding of monitoring systems, I was like, well, I know what we're doing with AI agents right now. We're deploying them at scale overnight across every sector. They're still vulnerable to prompt injection because that was a Gen AI problem that we've not fixed yet. And now we're giving them access to our critical business assets and tooling. And I was like, I felt very happy to bet the farm that this was going to be something which a CISO very soon was going to be very worried about and would want some monitoring in place to make sure it was doing what it was intended to be doing. And so I was like, right, that seeded the idea, and I was like, okay, I think that's the right place. And then it was a research paper from OpenAI and DeepMind that I read, which sort of like maybe have like the aha moment, which was like a new way of monitoring where you're looking at not just what the agent does, which is what historically all security monitoring systems have sort of looked at, like what actions something is taking, right? Whether that's your cloud assets, whether that's your laptops, EDRs, they're constantly looking at what your laptop is doing and making sure. It's like, okay, that side of things is obviously going to carry over to agents. But one of the new things which wasn't available, prior to agents was like the thought process, because as you use AI, and you'll have seen this yourself, you can see what it's thinking and what it's planning and what it's about to do and how it's approaching the sort of problem. And that was a whole new detection telemetry source, which had never existed, because we've never had the thought process of your laptop as it's like deciding what it's going to do. It's all just, done. It's programmatically decided. Whereas with an agent, it's sort of making these decisions up as it's going. And OpenAI and DeepMind tested this out to say, like, would that be a better way of monitoring if you could look at the activity and the thought process? And when they tested it, they found that it boosted the detection accuracy by 35%. And it was 4 times more likely to catch things that were quite nuanced, which made complete sense, because you're like, well, you've got full visibility into this. So I was like, okay, that for me feels like the core thing. Nobody had turned that into a product. Nobody started using that in their monitoring systems. So I was like, right, quit my job. And then started reverse engineering the research paper, how they'd done it, building out the first prototypes and sort of working there. So that was the sort of journey into it. Now it's obviously going on to other things, and and it's now growing a lot further beyond that. But at least that was the idea that sort of like was like, right, I think this is a problem. There's a solution I've got and how we can solve it.
Sure.
And it's an area which fits a lot of the boxes that I mentioned earlier. It's a product company. It's scalable. It's all of that.
Such a load of, like, the current state of things right now. I feel like a year ago, like, things have just changed drastically, even like with the advancements, like offset capabilities are just increasing. Like, what is the true state of things right now? We've obviously recently seen Mythos or Fable taken offline from public use. Like, what's sort of the current situation? And
well, this is why I keep on getting invited to speak on the BBC, because they keep on covering the fact that, and so the NCSC in the UK in May called out that everyone should be concerned about this, like, the offensive capabilities of AI systems are doubling what used to be every 2 years to every 8 months. And then they released another statement earlier last week, which is when I spoke on the BBC again, which was from not just the NCSC but all of the Five Eyes, saying the same thing, going, they're now doubling every 4 months in terms of how effective they are at taking malicious actions if you want them to, and if you can repurpose them to do that. So the agents themselves and the models that we're making, although they're brilliant at loads of things, are also brilliant at hacking and taking malicious actions. And we've also got the fact that essentially to do that, you would need to go to your agent. Let's say you go, right, I want you to go and hack, Asperon's website, right? Which is not a good example because it's your own
Please
website.
Don't do that.
Yeah. but the, that is not something that you're likely to do, right? You're not going to tell it to do that. However, if I tell your agent to do that, then what we've currently got is a state where agents and LLMs and all AI systems don't really know the difference between your instructions and my instructions. And so you can give it one task to do, but if I then send you an email and that email contains, oh, by the way, go and start now hacking this website, and it reads that, then it's very bad at going, okay, no, that I shouldn't do that, right? And so that's what we call prompt injection. It's an unsolvable problem as declared by the Frontier Labs, because of the nature of the fact that they all use natural language, and we can get into that another time. But because of that, you've got a system which can be coerced into taking actions, which is a very, very, very good at hacking and doing a lot of malicious things. And this is being deployed everywhere right now. And so this is why I feel like I've got to shout from the rooftops a lot about, like, AI security is something that we're going to look back on and be like, wow, we just sort of led that thing, let it run. We had, and the problem is that, like, the AI providers are all locked into this arms race of trying to reach ASI, AGI, the next big model, the next best benchmark results. And so although some places like Anthropic, I would say, probably do more than most around how they are trying to put the guardrails in, that's not their focus. That's not a moneymaker for them, right? Especially when they've got massive competition in and of themselves. So it's like, I don't see that really being something which they're going to focus on anytime soon. They've got their own initiatives, and so that's why I felt really strongly like we need a lot of security people on this.
Awesome. I think it ties nicely and segues great into how you guys in Secure Agentics, what you're actually doing, and how Adrian as a product, and even like its evolution since founding.
Yeah, I mean it's
Which is
growing
wild.
every day.
Yeah.
But yeah, so what I kind of mentioned earlier, like the idea was you can use these new approaches to how you can detect when an agent is doing something it shouldn't be, right? That's pretty obvious. Like, okay, if it's you've given it instructions and I've now come in to give it new instructions, how do we know that it's now deviating from what you intended it to do? And that's really what we solve, right? So what we do is what we call it is runtime security. So this isn't like security where you're giving a load of policies up at the org level and hoping that all of the AI systems. This is like very, very low level integrated with the agent, watching every single action it takes, pausing it before it takes actions to go, are you allowed to do that? Yes. Right. Next. Are you allowed to do that? Yes. And this is like the only real way of solving that problem, because if you go at the higher level, then you can just hope that things are behaving, but you don't actually have the low level, second by second, tool call by tool call ability to go, okay, is this actually doing something? Because it can change like that. And it can also not trigger any of the kind of policies that you have in place and still look pretty clear. So that's what we do. We have essentially an independent system, which is watching all of your agents, making sure that they are not doing things that you didn't intend. And that can be that they've been compromised, like I mentioned earlier, like I've gone in and said, oh, I want to, repurpose it. It could just be that, like in the example for like Replit, who are one of the famous first agentic breaches where they had a coding agent that deleted an entire customer production database with all of their data in it. That wasn't a breach. That was just an agent which kind of just panicked and did something crazy, right? So this is a brand new technology. So not only do you have like the cyber risk, which is clear given what we've just mentioned, but you've also got the fact that we don't really know how to use this technology at scale in a sensible way yet. Like we're still having massive problems. We're still having it panicking, falling over, deleting things, lying about stuff. So there's a lot of stuff there, which is like, right, if you want to have something which is just watching those agents, pausing them, making sure they're doing things what they should be. And for a CISO, you want this to go across your whole organization. So all agents, no matter where they are, they're aligned and they're being monitored. That's where we come in.
Yeah. It sounds complicated, but how easy is it for a potential customer to install and actually implement something like this?
Yeah, so we went open source with our product. So right now we are really pushing out on the community version of the product, and that version is installed via a software development kit, an SDK. Essentially, it's like when you're building your agent, you're writing the code. You can add in, it's 2 lines of code, and it's super straightforward to just go import Adrian and then Adrian initialize essentially. And those are the only 2 lines of code you need to write. And then it's all up there monitored. Then you go to the dashboard and you say like, right, this is my agent. This is what it should do. This is what it shouldn't do. You don't need to provide that. If you do provide it, then it's very, very good because it gives us more ability to monitor it in a kind of contextual way that makes sense for you and your business and your agents. But if not, then we just default back to blocking the obvious bad stuff as like, okay, well, you clearly don't want this to be a crypto miner, right? I'm going to assume most people don't want their agents to become crypto miners. So we can block things like that just by default. But the integration side is pretty lightweight. And then it will change as you kind of evolve in terms of what agents you're integrating with. But we've managed to, already build out a ton of integrations, and we've got community contributors, which is one of the brilliant things about being open source, who are also building out novel integrations because they're using it and they're saying, right, well, this is great so we launched with a LangChain integration, but they're like, right, well, I've also got OpenAI agents that I want to monitor. And so because we're open source, they can just go and build it. And that's what people have been doing. And they built it and then they've given us the code and been like, here you go, I built it. And so we just had like 2 major new integrations come from our community. And we're just like, well, that's awesome. So now we're able to move at like way faster pace because we've got people in the community who are picking things up and working independently and then just showing us when they've done it. And we go, yeah, that's good. We can accept it. Or no, you need to tweak it, which is more likely what happens.
Yeah, that's obviously one of the benefits having the community. So I was going to ask, why did you decide to go the open source route?
So I felt really strong about this because, especially coming from the practitioner community, like if you look at most of our competitors, they've all come from sort of large enterprise product companies, enterprise only commercial closed source companies, right? So it makes sense why they would always want to go closed source. Sorry, for me, I'd come from a community where I'd used open source tools my whole career. basically every tool which I ended up paying for was an open source or free tool which I used and then got value and then paid for. And that was like the most obvious thing to me, was like, that's how you use stuff. And especially nowadays, when a technical person looks to solve a problem, and this includes us internally and everyone really, when the first thing you do is you look at open source and see if there's something that already solves it free of charge. So like, we're hiring a lot at the moment, and what that means is we have been able to go, right, we've got an open source applicant tracking system now, we can feed that to Claude Code and it will get us 90% of the way there, and we've just saved ourselves all the money that we would have paid for an applicant tracking system. So like, we knew that if you can solve a problem which is key and you can make it open source, you will get people to sort of use it. So one element was from that side, and there's probably about another 10 or so advantages to it that we can dive into. But I guess the initial one was very much, and I don't want to just blab for like 10 minutes about all of the different advantages. We can go through them sort of differently and case by case. But there was an initial piece of like, this really fits with me and my journey. And the tools that I've used and have a lot of respect for, and the way that we work. So I was like, right, well, let's do that at least.
Yeah, that's really important, man. It's really important.
Yeah.
So what early traction have you had? And I saw, just looking at GitHub, looked like 350 like stars, and then I think 75 forks now. Yeah. So that's obviously great.
Yeah. So this is I guess advantage number 2 of being open source, is like the traction. So like, most of our competitors probably have somewhere between 5 and 10 and 15, maybe at a push 20 customers, right? Which is 20 potential opportunities to improve your product and learn if you're doing things right, find some semblance of product market fit, all of that. In the first 4 weeks, we had over 4,000 people using the product. So think of all the people who are now using it, who are improving it, we're learning from that. We're able to see where they're getting stuck, where they're getting blocked, the problems that they're finding in the product. Like, we fixed so many problems in the first couple of weeks because we just had so many people using it that we were able to do that. So the traction wise is like, yes, it helps with the traction. Yes, it helps with the external signaling and all that kind of stuff, but it also helps improve the product like a lot. And then, from the other side, we've got the GitHub stars. We're over 350 now. Just around 7 weeks post launch, which we're really proud of, because
incredible.
You look at some of the tools and it's like OpenClaw, 200,000, whatever. Like, generally security tools don't do quite as well as some of the other ones, and also what we're solving is a very like nascent problem. It's like a lot of people are just starting to think now about security monitoring for AI. Some of the other tools which are doing really well already, which is very well established spaces like sandboxing for your agents. That's been a thing since the start of 2025. So again, there's like different levels to like all of this in terms of benchmarking, but we kind of put our sights on PromptFoo, who are the sort of Gen AI open source bottom up player. And so we've mapped everything out against them to see how we're competing, and we're ahead of them in all the key metrics. So it took we're ahead in stars, but also the number. So you have to be slightly careful, especially speaking to a lot of investors at the moment, because you can buy GitHub stars. Now, we didn't, otherwise we'd have a lot more. But we actually had like 8 people message me on LinkedIn as soon as we launched, being like, do you want to buy GitHub stars? I was like, no, we don't want to buy GitHub stars. It's going to be so obvious, right? And also it's a bad thing to do morally. But so we kind of were like, right, because of that, some people don't trust stars, which makes sense. But like, the number which is a lot more telling is like forks, is like the people who have been downloading it, playing around with it. They've got a version of it which they're tweaking to make work for their sort of use case. And it took PromptFoo 6 months to reach 50 forks. We did that in under 4 weeks. And we also saw, and I probably shouldn't name names on the podcast, but we've seen like 5 household names, like enterprises, already downloading and using the open source version internally, which is amazing, because now we can reach out to them and we can go, hey, we know you're using the product. Do you want to have any chats with us? Do you want us to, do you want to be in a Slack with our engineers? We can help you guys. We've actually reached out to them and they put us in contact with their investment arm as well. It's like it's like a good foot in the door to be like, hey guys, we already know you're using our product. And that's only in like 5 weeks, 7 weeks. So, as this open source community grows and we continue to make it more useful, we continue to improve it, we integrate with more products, more agents that you can monitor with it. We're expecting that to really drive a lot of our go-to-market approach as well. And there's a couple of companies that have done this really, really well. So PromptFoo did it really well. They were in the previous era, so like Gen AI security and red teaming of AI, so very different market to what we're in. But they had the developer first, bottoms up evangelism. They had their Series A led by Insight and A16Z, and then they were acquired by OpenAI. So they had like a really good outcome and a good sort of playbook that we're emulating, and luckily we're in the kind of competitive landscape, we're the only ones that are open source, so that's good for us, and we're really like keen to like just keep pushing ahead on that and keep that sort of moving with the traction that we've got so far, just maintaining that all throughout summer and beyond.
Yeah, absolutely. And keeping with the momentum you mentioned earlier around hiring, so I know you've assembled like an absolute killer A team of professionals. Sonny's research that he posts is just like next level. For anyone interested, what positions might you be open to exploring, and if anybody's interested?
So actually this is a really good platform to say this on, because we're about to hire somebody from our community contributors.
No way.
And if I was based anywhere really, but like especially, you see, we get loads of messages from people based in India, from Pakistan, from other countries, and they're always asking, how can I get a job? And one of the interesting things is the way that open source opens up hiring. So like, yes, we've already got a killer team. We brought in a lot of the people that I knew, trusted, and we hired from Silicon Valley, and we've got all of those kind of skill sets in the team. But one of the amazing things about being open source is that, as I mentioned, you have the ability to look at people's code, right? It's very rare before somebody even steps foot in the organization, they've already built part of your product. So what that means is, with all of those pull requests that we get from our community, we're able to go, okay, this person's just done a really good job. They've built a really good, integration, useful for us. It works. We don't have to do it's not AI slop. We don't have to do 50 pushbacks on everything that they do. And so generally what we're looking for the foreseeable future will be developers, almost, a lot. So if you're listening and you're interested, the best way of getting into that is through our community project, because that's where we're currently we've got so many people contributing. We can see their code. We know, we have a Discord channel where they can just chat with our team internally, so we can get to know them a bit more. We can see how fast they work. We can see how they fit with the team. We can see the quality of their code. It shortcuts so much of our hiring process to go well, this person's already killing it, and now we just need to bring them into the team full time. So I would say that's the way I would do it. But also the other thing I was saying, and I was going to post about this next week, so it depends when this comes out, you may be able to pit me to it, but is that if I was in, again, anywhere, but specifically in some of those countries where you're trying to break into the Western market, for example, which we know there are tons of people trying to do that, how I would approach it now, having seen this, is I would absolutely start by looking for open source companies who've recently done funding rounds, who are going to be hiring. Look at their product, understand it, break it down, write some code which helps, make a new integration, fix a bug, do it really well, make it like your final project at uni, right? Make it properly. Don't just throw Claude at it and just submit it and hope it goes well, and add value and make it easy for them to merge and accept, right? If you can do that, you will be one of a handful of people who are immediately, the people in the organization are going, right, well, should we just bring this person in, right? That is 100% the playbook I would use, and somebody's just used it to basically get a job with us. And I'm that was really smart. That was a whole new way of playing the market. Rather than messaging people on LinkedIn where there's trust, you don't know how they're going to be, you don't know how good their English is, you don't know if they're going to be able to write good code, you don't know if they actually know anything about this, if they can build product at pace, all of these things. It's you can just shortcut all of that and prove it to them. In your free time, and then then you can start making the sort of oh, by the way, I'm looking for a job, do you want to do this? And I know a number of other open source companies that have done a similar sort of hiring motion, where they've got their community contributors that they brought into the team, because they're just right, well, it's obvious why,
I'll be definitely beating you to the LinkedIn post for that one. There's loads more to cover, Max, but I think for the interest of time, I know right now you're going through an interesting period of fundraising, so we're looking for a seed round. Do you want to just tell a little bit more about that process and what?
Yeah, so we are, by the time this is out, we'll be relatively late stage, but we're raising around at the moment to really kind of expand and grow. I mean, we did an open source launch and we did a relatively small pre-seed by design, and then the goal was always to kind of expand that out and to really sort of now be okay, we've got traction, we've got a product which people like, we've got the open source, we've got some really exciting stuff happening from the enterprise side as well. So we've already started working with some of the largest companies in the world. So it's we're not just an open source company, we've got the kind of the combination of both. We are, as I said, sort of, we're week 4 this week of since we started pitching. It's been going really well so far. So we're progressing on that front. And yeah, for now, that's probably most that I can share. We'll hopefully have some news coming up soon. But it's really just to, take this team, expand it out, grow it, really lean into this open source side, because that's going to be our long-term differentiator, especially once you get the community on your side. You can't buy that. You can't build that. That's like, it takes time and it takes love. And in fact, somebody who was done very well with open source companies was telling me the other day, it's like, you don't just, like, the community is like a flower. Like, you need to put the soil in, you need to water it, you need to nurture it. And so that's where, like, for me, like, every single one of our community contributors, I immediately message them on LinkedIn, on Discord. I say thank you. We invite them to the private channel. Do you want to contribute? We talk to them. We update them. We, keep things like along those lines. So it's like, we need to keep that going, and that's going to become something which is going to be a really defensible sort of advantage, because unless you're doing that as a competitor, then your community is a big thing, and you build a whole community around this podcast and how you work and how you work with VCs as well. Like that's what we're aiming to get from, like, the developer side, and the developers will bring that into the enterprise then, and we've already seen that sort of motion happening as well. So yeah, I mean, we are still taking pitches. We've done a lot, so we're probably going to start having to turn away first pitches pretty soon, because there's like a lot of interest. But yeah, it's, if you want to get in touch, it's at Max Corbridge on LinkedIn, or max@secureagentics.ai. Although, yeah, we'll have to move pretty quick at this stage.
Yeah, cool. Well, I'll put your deets in the show notes.
Cheers.
I think also I just want to touch on some of the product integrations. I know you've released 2 in the last 2 weeks or so.
Yeah.
Can we share the one that's coming up?
So we launched with LangChain. That was the obvious sort of open source framework to integrate with. We didn't want to be like vendor locked from day one. So like, if we started with Claude Code and then Claude or Anthropic made a change in their terms of services that made it really hard for external people to be able to, like, work in their ecosystem, then we would have been, like, dead in the water. And so we were like, right, LangChain is the open source bottom up sort of, like, framework that people are using. So let's do that. And then now we've started to really expand that out. So we launched with a Python SDK. We've now got a TypeScript SDK as well as a Python SDK. We launched with just LangChain. We've now got OpenAI Agents SDK. We've got somebody else in the community building out an Anthropic integration for us. And then we're hoping to have Claude Code integration live by the end of next week, which we're hoping is going to be a big one, because that's the mummy at the moment in terms of agent use cases. And then we're working on a couple of, like, more universal integrations. So rather than having to build out an individual one for every single agent, there's frameworks that you can use, or, like, architectures that you can use that allow you to integrate with. So we're hoping within, like, the framework that we'll cover, or the architecture that we're going to release soon, that will cover, like, in one go, we'll cover, like, Microsoft Copilot Studio, NAN, Crew AI, some SaaS apps, like, say, Agent Force, things in your cloud as well. So keep an eye on it, because it's going to be growing very, very fast. And especially when you've got a community building stuff for you as well, it helps you, like, really push that thing forward furthermore. But that's all just in the open source. In the enterprise, we've got a whole nother, we're not ready to unveil that yet, but we've got a lot going on there as well.
Well, Max, I wish you all the best of success for the future.
Thank you, brother.
Pleasure to be working with you, mate.
And you.